For years, we've been told the G-spot is the ultimate key to female pleasure. We've chased it, we've sought it, and for many, it's left us feeling incomplete. But what if I told you that the G-spot is just the beginning? That there are two other incredibly powerful and often overlooked pleasure zones waiting to be discovered. Today, we're going on a journey far beyond what you thought you knew about the female body. This isn't just a guide, it's a revelation. We're going to demystify the C-spot and the A-spot, revealing how they can lead to deeper connection, more intense orgasms, and a completely new understanding of intimacy. If you're ready to unlock a whole new world of pleasure, for yourself or with your partner, then you're in the right place. Let's begin. Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you something that might make you squirm a little in your seat. How many of you think you've truly mastered the art of female pleasure? I mean, really mastered it. Not just the basics that everyone talks about, but the hidden secrets that can transform an ordinary encounter into something absolutely mind-blowing. If you're sitting there thinking you know everything there is to know, well, I hate to break it to you, but you're probably missing out on some of the most powerful pleasure zones that exist. Here's the thing that absolutely blows my mind. We live in an age where you can learn how to build a rocket ship on YouTube, where you can master complex cooking techniques from world-renowned chefs, where you can become an expert in practically anything you want. Yet when it comes to understanding the female body and how to create genuine, earth-shattering pleasure, most people are walking around completely in the dark. It's like having a treasure map, but only knowing how to read half of it. I'm talking specifically about two incredible areas that most people have never even heard of, let alone know how to find or stimulate properly. The C-spot and the A-spot. Now, before you roll your eyes and think this is just another anatomy lesson, let me tell you why this matters so much. These aren't just random points on a map. These are game-changing discoveries that can completely revolutionize your understanding of pleasure and intimacy. The truth is, most people focus on the obvious, the well-known areas, and they think that's enough. They go through the motions, hit the familiar spots, and wonder why their partner isn't having the kind of explosive experiences they see in movies or read about in magazines. It's because they're missing crucial pieces of the puzzle. They're playing with half the instruments in the orchestra and wondering why the music doesn't sound as rich and full as it could. What I'm about to share with you isn't just technical information. This is about understanding pleasure in a completely different way. It's about recognizing that the female body is incredibly complex and beautifully designed, with multiple pathways to incredible sensations that most people never explore. When you understand these pathways, when you know how to navigate them skillfully and thoughtfully, everything changes. But here's what makes this even more important. This isn't just about physical technique, although that's certainly part of it. This is about communication, about patience, about understanding that every person is different and responds to different kinds of stimulation in different ways. Some people might find these spots incredibly sensitive and responsive, while others might find them less so. The key is knowing how to explore, how to ask questions, and how to pay attention to the responses you're getting. Before we dive into the specifics of where these spots are and how to find them, I want to address something that I think is really crucial. There's this myth out there that great lovers are born, not made. That some people just naturally know how to create incredible pleasure, while others are destined to be mediocre. That's complete nonsense. The best lovers are the ones who are curious, who ask questions, who pay attention, and who are willing to learn and experiment. The C-spot and A-spot aren't mysterious. Impossible to find locations that require years of training to access. They're real, anatomical areas that you can learn to locate and stimulate effectively. But like anything worthwhile, it takes some knowledge, some practice, and most importantly, some genuine care and attention to your partner's responses and comfort level. Let me give you a framework for thinking about this. The female body has multiple erogenous zones, each with its own characteristics and potential for creating pleasure. Some are external, some are internal, some respond to light touch, others to deeper pressure. The C spot and A spot are part of this incredible network of pleasure possibilities, and when you understand how they fit into the bigger picture, you can create experiences that are truly extraordinary. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. You might be wondering if this is all just hype, if these spots really make that much of a difference. Let me tell you something that might surprise you. Many women go their entire lives without ever experiencing the kind of pleasure that these spots can provide, simply because their partners don't know they exist or how to find them. That's not their fault, and it's not your fault either if you didn't know about this before. But now that you're here, now that you're learning, you have the opportunity to completely change that. The C spot, which we'll explore in detail, is actually much more accessible than most people realize. It's not hidden in some impossible-to-reach location. It's there, waiting to be discovered and appreciated. But like anything worthwhile, it requires the right approach, the right technique, and the right mindset. The A spot is a bit more complex, a bit more challenging to access. But when you understand how to find it and stimulate it properly, the results can be absolutely incredible. Some researchers and pleasure experts consider it one of the most powerful pleasure zones in the female body, capable of creating intense, full-body sensations that many people have never experienced. What I love about teaching this information is seeing how it transforms not just technique, but entire relationships. When you approach pleasure with curiosity, with a genuine desire to learn and explore, when you make it about discovery, rather than just achieving a goal, everything becomes more connected, more intimate, more satisfying for everyone involved. Throughout this video, we're going to break down exactly where these spots are located, how to find them, what kind of stimulation they respond to best, and most importantly, how to approach this exploration in a way that feels good, comfortable, and exciting for your partner. We'll talk about communication strategies, different techniques you can try, and how to pay attention to the feedback you're getting. But before we get into the technical details, I want you to understand something fundamental. This isn't about following works amazingly. For one person might not work the rigid set of instructions or treating pleasure like a mechanical process. Every person is different, every body responds differently, and what same way for another. The goal isn't to become a pleasure robot-skilled explorer who knows how to read responses following a predetermined program. The goal is to become a thoughtful, attentive, adjust techniques, and create experiences that are completely transform your intimate experiences. Are you prepared, genuinely tailored to your specific partner? So of pleasure in ways that cool, are you ready to expand your understanding to learn about areas of the female body that most people never discover? Good. Because we're about to dive deep into the fascinating world of the C spot and A spot. And by the time we're finished, you'll have knowledge that puts you way ahead of the vast majority of people out there. Let me start by completely changing how you think about the C spot, because everything you've probably heard is either incomplete or just plain wrong. The C-spot isn't some tiny hidden button that you need a treasure map to find. It's actually the most obvious pleasure zone on the female body, yet somehow it's also the most misunderstood. And here's the kicker. Most men think they know exactly what it is and how to handle it, but they're approaching it all wrong. The C-spot is simply another name for the clitoris, but calling it the C-spot helps us think about it differently. When most guys hear clitoris, they immediately think of that little pearl at the top, that tiny visible part that everyone talks about. They zero in on it like it's a button on an elevator, thinking if they just press it the right way, magic will happen. But that's like thinking the tip of an iceberg is the whole iceberg. What you can see is maybe 10% of what's actually there. The clitoris is actually a complex internal structure that extends deep into the body, with arms that reach down on both sides of the vaginal opening. It's shaped like a wishbone, with nerve endings that branch out through the entire pelvic region. When we talk about the C-spot, we're talking about this entire network, not just that tiny visible portion that gets all the attention. Here's what blows my mind about this whole situation. Men will spend hours learning about cars, memorizing stats about their favorite sports teams, or mastering video games with incredible precision and patience. But when it comes to understanding this fundamental part of female anatomy, they act like they should just instinctively know what to do. They approach it with about as much finesse as trying to tune a violin with a hammer. The reality is that effective C-spot stimulation requires understanding, patience, and variety. That little visible part, what we call the glans, is incredibly sensitive. Sometimes it wants direct attention, sometimes indirect, sometimes light touches, sometimes more pressure, sometimes fast movements, sometimes slow. The key is learning to read the responses you're getting and adjusting accordingly. But here's where it gets really interesting. The C-spot responds to different types of stimulation at different times. During the beginning stages of arousal, direct stimulation might actually be uncomfortable or even painful. The area needs time to become engorged with blood, to wake up and become receptive. It's like trying to sprint before you've warmed up. You're just asking for problems. Instead of diving straight for that obvious spot, smart lovers understand that the entire area needs attention first. The surrounding tissues, the inner thighs, the lower belly, all of these areas help prepare the C-spot for more direct stimulation. It's about building anticipation, creating a foundation of arousal that makes everything else more intense and pleasurable. Now let's talk about technique, because this is where most people go completely off track. They think faster is better, or harder is better, or that there's some magic rhythm that works for everyone. That's like thinking every song should be played at the same tempo with the same volume. Music doesn't work that way, and neither does pleasure. The C-spot responds beautifully to variation. Try circular motions, try side to side, try up and down, try using your tongue, your fingers, different textures, different temperatures. Pay attention to breathing changes, muscle tension, vocal responses. The body will tell you what it likes if you're paying attention. One technique that many people overlook is indirect stimulation. Instead of focusing directly on the glans, try stimulating the areas around it, the hood that covers it, the sides, the base where it meets the inner lips. Sometimes the most intense sensations come from teasing around the target rather than hitting it directly. Temperature play can be incredibly effective with C-spot stimulation. Warm breath, cool air, ice cubes, warm oil. All of these can create different sensations that enhance the overall experience. The key is variety and paying attention to what creates the strongest positive responses. But here's something most people never consider: The C-spot doesn't exist in isolation. It's connected to that entire internal network I mentioned earlier. When you're stimulating the external portion, you're also affecting those internal structures. This is why some women can experience intense pleasure from C-spot stimulation alone, while others need additional internal stimulation to reach their peak. This brings us to something absolutely crucial that most people miss entirely. The C-spot changes throughout the arousal process. What feels amazing at the beginning might become too intense later, or what doesn't work early on might be exactly what's needed as things progress. Great lovers learn to adapt their approach based on where their partner is in their arousal cycle. Early on, light touches, teasing, indirect stimulation might be perfect. As arousal builds, more direct pressure, faster movements, or consistent rhythm might be what's needed. And here's the part that surprises many people. Sometimes backing off from direct stimulation at key moments can actually intensify the overall experience. Now let's shift gears completely and talk about the A-spot, because this is where things get really interesting and where most people are completely in the dark. The A-spot, also known as the anterior fornix erogenous zone, is located much deeper in the vaginal canal than most people ever explore. We're talking about an area that's typically 4 to 6 inches inside, near the cervix, but on the front wall. Here's why the A-spot is so fascinating and so overlooked. Most people focus their attention on the first couple of inches inside the vagina, the area where the G-spot is located. They think that's as deep as they need to go, or they're worried about going deeper, or they simply don't know that there's another incredibly sensitive area waiting to be discovered much further in. The A-spot is different from other erogenous zones in several important ways. First, it tends to be less sensitive to light touch and more responsive to deeper pressure. Second, it often requires a longer warm-up period before it becomes fully responsive. And third, when stimulated effectively, it can produce incredibly intense, full-body sensations that many people have never experienced. Finding the A-spot requires a different approach than finding other pleasure zones. You need to think in terms of depth and angle, not just location. It's positioned on the front vaginal wall, similar to the G-spot, but much deeper, almost at the very back where the vaginal canal meets the cervix. Here's the thing that absolutely amazes me about the A-spot, and this is something that most people never realize. Unlike other areas that might be sensitive to touch right away, the A-spot often needs time to wake up. It's like a sleeping giant that requires patience and the right kind of attention before it reveals its incredible potential. This is why so many people miss it entirely. They're looking for immediate responses instead of understanding that some of the most powerful sensations require a bit more investment up front. Or, when you're exploring this area, you need to think about anatomy in a completely different way. The A-spot sits in what's called the anterior fornix, which is basically a small pocket or recess near the cervix. It's surrounded by incredibly rich nerve networks that connect to the pelvic floor, the uterus, and the entire reproductive system. When you stimulate this area effectively, you're not just creating localized sensations, you're activating an entire network of pleasure pathways. But here's where most people go wrong when they're trying to find the A-spot. They think they can just reach in and immediately locate it, like they're looking for a light switch. That's not how this works at all. The vaginal canal changes shape and size based on arousal levels, emotional state, and even the time of month. What might be easily accessible one day could be completely different the next. The key to A-spot exploration is understanding that this isn't a quick destination. It's a journey. You need to approach it gradually, allowing the body to open up and become receptive. This means starting with external stimulation, moving to shallow internal exploration, and only gradually working your way deeper as the body becomes more aroused and relaxed. One of the most important things to understand about A-spot stimulation is that it requires a completely different touch than what most people are used to. We're not talking about the light, teasing touches that might work well for other areas. The A-spot responds to deeper, more sustained pressure. Think firm and consistent rather than light and variable. Many people find that using fingers isn't the most effective way to reach and stimulate the A-spot properly. The angle and depth required can be challenging to maintain with manual stimulation alone. This is where understanding different positions and techniques becomes incredibly important. Certain angles of penetration naturally provide better access to this deep area. What's fascinating about the A-spot is how it can create what researchers call a different type of orgasmic response. While other areas might create more localized, intense sensations, A-spot stimulation often produces deeper, more rolling waves of pleasure that seem to emanate from the core of the body outward. Some women describe it as feeling like pleasure is radiating from their center to every part of their body. But here's something crucial that I need to emphasize. A-spot exploration requires exceptional communication and attention to comfort levels. Because this area is so deep and close to the cervix, it's possible to create discomfort if you're not careful. Some people find cervical contact uncomfortable or even painful, while others find it incredibly pleasurable. You absolutely must pay attention to verbal and non-verbal feedback during this kind of exploration. The timing of A-spot exploration matters enormously. This isn't something you dive into during the first few minutes of intimacy. The body needs time to become fully aroused, for the vaginal canal to lengthen and expand, for all the tissues to become engorged and receptive. Rushing this process is like trying to stretch a cold muscle. You're just asking for discomfort. Here's something that might surprise you about both the C-spot and A-spot. The most intense experiences often come from combining stimulation of multiple areas simultaneously. The C-spot and A-spot can work together in incredible ways, creating layered sensations that are far more powerful than either area, stimulated alone. It's like the difference between playing a single note and playing a full chord. When you're stimulating the C-spot externally, while also providing deep A-spot pressure, you're creating what some experts call a pleasure sandwich. The external sensations and the deep internal sensations meet somewhere in the middle, creating incredibly intense waves of pleasure that can be absolutely mind-blowing. But coordination is key here. You can't just randomly stimulate both areas and expect magic to happen. The rhythm, pressure, and timing all need to work together harmoniously. This is where that communication I keep talking about becomes absolutely essential. You need to be constantly checking in, paying attention to responses, adjusting your approach based on what's working. The beautiful thing about mastering C-spot and A-spot stimulation is that it opens up entirely new possibilities for pleasure and intimacy. When you understand how to access these areas effectively, when you know how to combine different types of stimulation, when you can read your partner's responses and adjust accordingly, you're not just improving technique, you're transforming the entire experience. What I find most exciting about teaching this information is seeing how it changes people's entire approach to intimacy. Instead of following some rigid playbook or trying to recreate what they've seen in movies, they start approaching pleasure as an art form. They become curious explorers rather than goal-oriented performers. They focus on the journey rather than just the destination. This shift in mindset makes everything better. Communication improves because you're focused on discovery rather than just getting to a finish line. Pressure decreases because you're not trying to achieve some predetermined outcome. Pleasure increases because you're paying attention to what actually feels good rather than what you think should feel good. The C spot and A spot are gateways to understanding that pleasure is complex, nuanced, and deeply personal. What works amazingly for one person might need significant modification for another. The techniques I'm teaching you aren't rigid rules. They're starting points for exploration. They're ways to begin understanding how these incredible areas of the female body can create extraordinary sensations when approached with knowledge, patience, and genuine care. As we continue exploring these concepts, remember that becoming skilled at this isn't about memorizing techniques or following step-by-step instructions. It's about developing sensitivity, building communication skills, and approaching intimacy with curiosity and respect. The most powerful tool you have isn't your hands or your mouth. It's your ability to pay attention, to listen, and to respond thoughtfully to what your partner's body is telling you. But here's where things get really wild, and this is something that absolutely nobody talks about. The relationship between the C spot and A spot isn't just about location or technique. It's about timing, rhythm, and creating what I like to call pleasure waves that build on each other in ways that can completely blow your mind. Think about it like this. When you're listening to your favorite song, it's not just the individual notes that make it incredible. It's how those notes flow together, how they build tension and release it, how they create patterns that your brain finds irresistible. The same principle applies here. The magic happens when you understand how to orchestrate different types of stimulation so they enhance and amplify each other. Most guys approach this like they're trying to hit two separate targets. They'll focus on the C spot for a while, then switch to the A spot, then back again, treating them like completely separate experiences. But that's missing the whole point. These areas are connected through complex nerve pathways, and when you stimulate them in harmony, you create something that's exponentially more powerful than either one alone. Here's a technique that will absolutely change everything for you. Instead of thinking about switching between areas, think about creating layers of sensation. Start with gentle C-spot stimulation while gradually building toward A-spot contact. As the arousal increases and the body opens up, you can maintain that external rhythm while adding deeper internal pressure. The key is never abandoning one area to focus on the other, but rather building a symphony of sensations. What happens when you get this right is absolutely incredible. The external sensations from C-spot stimulation create waves that seem to travel inward, while the deep A-spot pressure creates waves that radiate outward. When these waves meet and synchronize, they create what some women describe as full-body earthquakes of pleasure. It's not just a localized sensation anymore. It becomes this all-encompassing experience that seems to take over everything. But here's the part that most people completely miss, and this is crucial. The breathing patterns, the muscle tension, the vocal responses, all of these things change dramatically when you're successfully combining C-spot and A-spot stimulation. You need to learn to read these signals because they'll tell you exactly when you've hit that sweet spot where everything is working together perfectly. When someone is experiencing combined stimulation effectively, their breathing becomes deeper and more rhythmic. Their muscle tension increases in waves, rather than just building steadily. Their vocalizations become more involuntary and intense. These are the signs that tell you you're creating those pleasure waves I'm talking about, not just random stimulation. Now let me share something that might completely change how you think about pressure and intensity. Most guys think that more pressure equals more pleasure, or that faster movement creates better sensations. But when you're working with both the C spot and A spot simultaneously, it's actually about finding the right balance between different types of pressure. The C spot often responds beautifully to lighter, more varied touch, especially when there's already deep stimulation happening internally. Meanwhile, the A spot typically needs that firm, consistent pressure to really wake up and become responsive. Learning to maintain two completely different types of touch simultaneously takes practice, but when you master it, the results are absolutely mind-blowing. Here's a practical approach that works incredibly well. Use your dominant hand for the deeper A spot stimulation, maintaining steady pressure and rhythm. Use your other hand or mouth for C spot attention, varying the intensity and pattern based on the responses you're getting. This creates a beautiful contrast between the consistent deep sensations and the more playful external stimulation. So there you have it, gentlemen. The C spot and A spot aren't just anatomical curiosities. They're your keys to unlocking levels of pleasure that most people never even know exist. Remember, this isn't about following some rigid formula. It's about becoming the kind of lover who pays attention, communicates openly, and approaches intimacy with genuine curiosity and care. Take what you've learned here and start exploring, because the most incredible experiences are waiting for those brave enough to go beyond the obvious.
This video is for educational and informational purposes only. The content shared is based on personal experiences, psychological studies, and general relationship advice. It is not intended to replace professional medical, psychological, or relationship counseling. Individual experiences may vary, and it's important to communicate openly with your partner and seek professional guidance if needed. Viewer discretion is advised, as this video discusses topics related to intimacy and relationships. If you have any health concerns or medical conditions that may affect your intimate life, please consult a qualified healthcare professional before making any changes. By watching this video, you acknowledge that the creator is not responsible for any personal decisions or outcomes resulting from the information provided.